The one thing they all said in common, the one thing they all shared was, don't go there. And what they meant was that nobody wakes up and says, oh, gee, I think I'll start a nuclear war today. What a good idea. That never happens. What does happen is you get into an escalatory situation, back and forth, where you're escalating and escalating, and you end up in a nuclear war. You never intended it, never started out that way, but you end up there through escalation.
Kiev and its allies believe that while Russian President Vladimir Putin aimed to overthrow the Ukrainian government in a lightning offensive, he's actually failed to achieve that goal. The Russian army claims it will now focus on gaining control of Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. But President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will not give up Ukrainian territory for the sake of peace.
This month, dozens of Russians arrived at the US-Mexico border seeking asylum. Nearly all of them fled political repression related to the war. They're either active in the anti-war opposition or have connections to Ukraine. US border authorities turned them away, but they refused to leave and formed an encampment just on the Mexico side of the border crossing.
Are you willing to leave? When they tell you that you need to leave this place, are you willing to do that?
Никто не готов выйти с улицы, потому что мы боимся, если мы покинем эту территорию.
The United States warning Ukraine a full-scale Russian invasion is imminent.
They are ready to go right now.
At least 150,000 Russian troops along the border are poised to strike at any moment. Facing them, an estimated 250,000 Ukrainian troops ready to defend their country.
Putin has the gall to say he's denazifying Ukraine. It's a lie. It's just cynical. He knows that. And it's also obscene. Let me say this, if you're able to listen. You, the Russian people, are not our enemy. I refuse to believe that you welcome the killing of innocent children and grandparents, or that you accept hospitals, schools, maternity wards, and for God's sake, being pummeled with Russian missiles and bombs. This man cannot remain in power.
What happens in Russia doesn't stay in Russia. Russia may be the first victim of US sanctions, but the entire world will pay the final price. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, so that's kind of where I wanted to start with you today, is that the buck doesn't stop here, right? These are repercussions that will be felt for how many years, Jim?
Well, the repercussions may be felt for 10 years or longer, but the immediate impact is going to go well beyond the so-called sanctions. What the point I was really making was we're slapping sanctions on Russia. Russia is hitting back with some retaliatory actions, and it's pretty easy to look at the direct impact of that, but there's second order and third order effects that will pop up all over the world and could very quickly get out of control. Think of it as the economic equivalent of a nuclear war. Nobody wants a nuclear war. The one thing they all said in common, the one thing they all shared was, don't go there. And what they meant was that nobody wakes up and says, oh, gee, I think I'll start a nuclear war today. What a good idea. That never happens. What does happen is you get into an escalatory situation, back and forth, where you're escalating and escalating, and you end up in a nuclear war. You never intended it, never started out that way, but you end up there through escalation. Now take that, and that is good analysis, take that and apply it to what is now, I would say, the first full-scale economic war, sanctions war. We've had sanctions, for a long time. I mean, going back to at least the 70s with Iran, but even before that, I mean, FDR put sanctions on Japan in August 1941, and then 5 months later they bombed Pearl Harbor. So the not coincidence, but the coexistence or interaction of economic sanctions and kinetic warfare is nothing new. So we've had it before. Nothing on this scale. This is unprecedented in its scope and application. And my only point is the effects of this are going to not just last a long time, yes, but they're going to pop up in very, very unexpected places. You can say unintended consequences, but there's actually a scientific basis for this. It's called complexity theory. We don't have to get too much down in the weeds. But again, 1998, which was the last time Russia defaulted, I think we can expect more Russian defaults going forward. But 1998, August 17th, they did default on their external debt and the ruble. But that actually started in Thailand in June 1997. It was kind of a run on the bank in Thailand. The baht was devalued. It spread. And by the way, the spread of financial distress is exactly like the spread of a virus. It's not just a metaphor. The math is the same. So that spread from Thailand to Malaysia, to Indonesia, to South Korea, and there was literally blood in the streets. People were killed in financial riots in South Korea. Then there was a little bit of a quiet period. Then it popped up in Russia, and it ended up in my lap. We were a hedge fund in Greenwich, Connecticut. Economic sanctions, economic warfare are among my areas of expertise. I've done a lot of it for years, but I do a seminar for kind of mid-career big thinkers in the military run by the U.S. Army War College, but involves all branch, and I teach the seminar in financial warfare. So it's kind of my topic, but I don't want to overlook the human tragedy and the human cost and the civilian casualties from what's going on in Ukraine. So when I talk about economic effects, I'm not either unaware of that or unsympathetic. We certainly all pray for the victims of this, but that's on the news every night. We get enough of that, but I don't think the economic side of it, which is our subject, is not that well understood. We have a Thai currency crisis, and then a year later, every global market is on the verge of being closed. And that was the case. We got that bailout done. We got $4 billion in cash and propped up the balance sheet, and the Fed cut interest rates, and we went on from there. But as Wellington said, it was a close run thing. But we were prepared for every market in the world, beginning in Tokyo, to close sequentially. So now here we are in 2022, same thing's happening. What was interesting yesterday is that Russia actually paid some sovereign debt in dollars, and everyone's like, wait a second, I got some calls yesterday. I thought we had sanctions. I thought we kicked them out of SWIFT. We kicked them out of the payment system. We froze their accounts. How come they got to pay dollars? Well, the answer is two things. Number one, a lot of those sanctions have delayed effective dates. They don't actually kick in until 30, 60, or 90 days, as the case may be. But more to the point, somebody in the Treasury, and it's always surprising when they get things right, but somebody in the Treasury woke up and said, wait a second, we don't need another financial crisis on top of a war. Let's let the Russians at least pay that coupon, and then we'll take it from there. So there's a little bit less than meets the eye in these sanctions. But somebody woke up and said, let's avoid a global liquidity crisis, because that's what you're heading for if you really enforce these sanctions.
Russia is arming Ukraine rebels, and U.S. is preparing to arm Kiev. So we'll have a nice little U.S.-Russia proxy war soon, just like #Vietnam. Did you expect anything like this?
I did. Let me make the point. This was there was never a war that was easier to prevent. There's never been a war that's easier to prevent, and there's never been a war that's easier to end. You could end this war in 48 hours or less. Having said that, I did expect that through a series of policy blunders and escalation, in this case, military escalation and political escalation, that this war would take place. And Putin didn't take one square inch during the Trump administration, because Trump is highly unpredictable, but put Biden back in, who was part of the original Obama-Biden team, and here we are again. So you could easily see this coming.